Hi, I'm your host, Sid Patrick. Today we have Kalila Smith, author, historian, paranormal investigator, medium, and on the management team of Haunted History Tours. Today we'll be discussing Kalila's books and the journey she had into metaphysics. We'll talk about how Kalila and I met in this journey of mediumship that she began. Thank you and stay tuned for more. And now a word from our sponsor.
Welcome to a different kind of inner peace. Here at the Metaphysical Resource Center, you will find a variety of classes, services, and events. We sell metaphysical products and accessories. You can schedule a session with one of our professional healers, mediums, readers, or even a table tipping event. We are your resource for all things metaphysical.
We know you're coming, darling, for that reading, and tell them Psychic Sissy sent ya.
Welcome back, and like I said, today we have Kalila Smith. Welcome, Kalila. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me today. I'm really excited about this.
Well, I've been telling our audience a little bit about you and all the things that you do. So let's talk about our journey, how we met and how we got here to this spot today.
Okay. Actually, I met you under very unfortunate circumstances, as you recall. I just lost my daughter several months before, and I was in a really dark place. Even though I had spent 20 years or more working with the paranormal and working what I believed at the time was true mediumship on investigations, communicating with spirits and so forth. Once she was gone, I was having trouble connecting with her, and I couldn't figure out why, and I became very doubtful of everything I believed in. I mean, this not only was a period of grief for me, but it just totally shattered my belief system, and I was really in a very deep place. The day before I came to meet you, actually, I was literally on the floor and couldn't breathe. I was crying so hard. But I had been toying with an idea of going to a convention to promote some of my books, just to get myself out of New Orleans, and I couldn't make up my mind if I should go. So I was walking down the street, and as I was passing a grocery store, a person came out that I knew and literally just walked up to me, had no idea what I was going through, and said, "You need to go call this person," and handed me your business card. And I had no idea that there was a center in Metairie at the time. I had no idea that there were psychic fairs, and I certainly had no idea that we had an international medium in New Orleans. And I thought perhaps you were the only person that might be able to help me. And indeed you were, because after that, I mean, from the very moment that you walked into the room, you connected with her. That was a big breakthrough for me at that moment, was when you actually confirmed that you were connecting with her.
Good. And so, with all this going on in your life, kind of let our viewers know how that inspired you, and the journey, how it inspired you in writing and getting the books that you've created out, and then we're going to take everybody through the journey of where we are today.
The books, many of the books I had written on the paranormal had been written since 1997. It was an ongoing journey for me, but when Stephanie passed away, I used my writing as a way of working through my initial grief. I was barely functional, but I could write. It was how I expressed myself. It was how to work through the emotions. And the first book that I wrote within like 6 weeks was called Farewell, My Forever Child. And it's a self-published book. And it's basically a tribute to Stephanie, and it's to help parents understand, because one of the first things I noticed when she was gone was that no one had a book on grief for special needs parents. And people don't understand, the complicated type of grief that's involved with that. And you really grieve on and off throughout a child's life when you have a child like that, because it's constantly a battle, constantly hurdles that you're jumping over, constantly fear that something horrible is going to happen to the child because they're sick. And then when you finally get to that point where when you do lose that child, the attachment that you've made by being that child's caretaker 24/7, in the case of Stephanie, was for 30 years. So it was a different type of connection than you have with regular people in your life.
And just to clarify for our audience, Stephanie was a child of Down syndrome.
She had Down syndrome, yes.
And you had been caring for her all of her life, and she was with you day in and day out. So the bond you guys shared was very different than what the normal parent may, experience growing up. I mean, it's a loss is horrible, but besides the parental grief, you also had the caregiver for so many more years.
Absolutely, right.
So that was like a whole different type of, it involved so much more different types of grief.
For special parents, it is a different bond that you have with your child because you don't go through that separation in each stage of the child's life. The child never gets to those stages. So the child never hits 18, goes away to college. You never have the empty nest. The child really never separates from the parent. So it's a completely different kind of bond. And there was no resource out there for parents suffering this kind of loss. And I wanted to have something that would honor Stephanie's memory, but also give back to help other parents who would go through a similar loss. And in fact, in my own life, I know a couple of people who have special needs children, and that they're going to go through this one day, possibly. And this needed to be done. So I finished that book, I put it out there, and then I began working on a book called Afterlife Mysteries Revealed. And this was more of my journey through my grief, not only through my grief, but finding my way back to my belief system. Because I had abandoned that. I really didn't believe anymore. I thought that maybe the last 20 years of my life, I made up everything. Mm-hmm. And I really had to find myself and find my spiritual path again. And also try to find my way to keep connected with her, because the thought of losing that connection with her was just terrifying for me.
Yes. I think one of the biggest messages I gave you the day when we met for the first time was about grief and how, in that grief process, if we can't get past that, it's harder to connect to our loved ones that have crossed. It's harder to gain that sense that they're always with us, because the grief just separates you from that. And so what I'd like to talk about a little bit is let our viewers know a little bit about that journey of how your grief has has stepped back and you were able to regain your strength.
Even though I knew much of metaphysical things that I knew over the last 20, 30 years, I know about vibration, I know about positive, negative emotions. When that kind of a grief strikes, all bets are off. Right. When you're in it yourself, you can't see the forest for the trees. You're in the middle of it, it's pulling you down. And one of the things that you don't remember, and it doesn't matter what you don't remember that kind of heaviness, that type of negative vibration is going to separate you from those higher vibrational spirits, those who are on the other side. And that was the hardest part to remember. That was the hardest part to learn. And you were the one who reminded me of this, that I've got to let go of the grief. And it's to the average person, that sounds like, well, how does one do that? That's impossible. But if you remember about the vibration, and that you have to raise that vibration once people are on the other side. And the other biggest lesson for me was that realizing that for so many years, the spirits I had been communicating with were really just the earthbound ones. They were not the ones who had crossed over into that light. It was a whole nother realm of the other side that I hadn't even touched the surface of. And I think that's part of my spiritual journey. So that was another thing that I had to be reminded of, and that other people really lose sight of, is that when our loved ones do pass, that lots of times that separation from that person that's so dear to you is part of your spiritual evolution. That person has completed their journey here, and the rest of the journey is the lessons that you learn from that departure.
And what I'd like to just kind of cue our audience into is tell them some of those crossing points, some of the things that happened, and how did you connect to those things. I know one was the day you left from the reading. I believe we had some black crows hit the porch, and so I want to talk about the different things that you've experienced, and just kind of let the audience know that the different ways that our loved ones do try to connect with us.
Some of the clues I missed in the very beginning because of the grief. But yes, you had emailed me later that evening after I had left, and you said that a huge black crow had landed on the front porch and stayed there for hours after I had left. And it was really kind of weird, because I had had several instances since Stephanie had passed with animals, very strange things. One of the things was a cat. And in the many books that I read after I was going through this, I read a lot of Raymond Moody's books on griefs, and he said that lots of times one of the signs from our loved ones was the strange behavior of animals. And our neighbor, a few doors down, had a cat, an orange and white cat with a blue collar. And I had seen that cat for 13 years in the front yard. It never left my neighbor's front yard. Well, 2 days after Stephanie passed away, this cat was on my front porch. And every time I went outside, this cat's there, and I'm like, did my neighbors go on vacation? Did they leave? What in the world happened? And before I knew it, I was sitting at my computer, and the cat is on my back window and literally clawing at my screen. And I was like, oh God, the last thing I need is another cat. And it didn't occur to me till much later, after I ignored the cat, that that was probably Stephanie giving me a sign. And then I panicked because I thought, oh, when I shoot her away, you know. Also the butterflies. Butterflies are one of the #1 ways that our loved ones do communicate with us. And I started seeing butterflies everywhere. And the oddest thing, I mean, what are the odds that I'm cutting grass with a loud lawnmower and a butterfly would come out from under it and get in my face? Everywhere, every time I'd step out of my car, a butterfly would come and come towards me and then kind of do a figure 8 and take off. And I saw repeated episodes of butterfly after butterfly after butterfly. And I started realizing, I really feel like this is from Stephanie. And one of the dreams that I had about her early on, I couldn't see her. It was almost as if she was on the other side of a sheer shower curtain. And I could just see her kind of some muddled image, and her hands came through. And she did this. And she did this at me. And then I remembered when she was a very small child, before she was able to speak, about 2 years old, they had taught her sign language. And she used to always do this all the time and talk to me in sign language. She would sign to me about butterflies. And she was reminding me from 20-something years before that, yes, this is me. This is me. But the entire dream, it was really weird because the entire dream was in sign language. And my mother even showed up and was signing to me because my mother grew up in a household with a deaf mother and deaf brothers. So which is another story, but it was really kind of strange because in the early stages, before I was getting a lot of the contact, she was actually showing up and signing to me.
Ah, wonderful. So there's other weird stories with flying.
Very weird
stories with flying insects and so forth. So share those with us.
There was a grasshopper that had to be this big. Now the French Quarter, where I work, for those people who aren't in the French Quarter, it's concrete. Mm-hmm. It's wall-to-wall concrete. We don't have grasshoppers. We don't have butterflies. But a few nights we actually did. And it was the weirdest thing. I had finished up a tour in Pirates Alley one evening, and there was a grasshopper on one of the buildings, and you couldn't miss it because it was bright green. And while I was talking to people after the tour, this thing kind of darted at me, and I was like freaked out. I was like, I gotta get out of here. I can't handle the bugs flying around. So I left, and the following evening when I parked my car up under one of the galleries, one of the overhangs, this huge grasshopper was sitting there right where I parked. And I looked at it and I thought, gosh, it's kind of creepy. I'm gonna have to, if I didn't know better, I'd think that grasshopper's following me. So I got out of my car and I quickly kind of dodged around into the street and I went back into a courtyard and I began to do some of my paperwork back at a table in the courtyard. And before long I had to go to the restroom. So I had to go back into this little alcove where the ladies' room was, and right on the door of the ladies' room was that grasshopper again on the door. I mean, what are the odds? What are the odds? And then later that evening, when I was conducting a tour, as I was coming back into the alley, I could see this thing flying in front of me. And you could see it, and it was kind of doing back and forth. This huge grasshopper, as if it was leading the way. And it came and parked right above me. And oddly enough, my granddaughters who work at a snowball stand had a similar incident with a huge grasshopper right in that same time frame, where the grasshopper kept appearing on the car and then actually got into the snowball stand. So we were pretty convinced that this was Stephanie, again, trying to get our attention, but I had to tell her at that point, don't send any more grasshoppers.
Yeah.
Stick with the butterflies.
Stick with butterflies.
We like the butterflies. We like the butterflies. But there's been many things that didn't involve animals. For instance, on the anniversary, the 1-year anniversary was very, very tough for me. And again, I was in the French Quarter, getting ready to go to work, and I was kind of preparing the money. You have to have banks to give change to customers when you're in retail. So I was sitting in my car, and I started thinking about what if I never see her again? You know, again, that doubt comes in, and that's part of the grief, and that's what a lot of people don't realize, is that part of the grief is this disconnection from reality, this not really knowing what's real and what's not real. You start really feeling like you're going crazy. And so I started questioning everything that I experienced, even large grasshoppers. I was sitting there and I almost really broke down because I started thinking, what if I never see her again? And I said out loud, I said, God, how do I know I'm ever going to see her again? And at that precise moment, I glanced up, and a car was passing by and stopped at the stop sign about 2 cars up. And it was the one and only car in the state of Louisiana that had a license plate on it that said, Believe.
You can't
And
make
that,
up.
no, you can't make that up.
up.
And the only thing I could absolutely kick myself in the butt for was that I didn't even think to pull my camera out and take a picture of it. I just sat there with my mouth hanging open, staring. And then I started laughing because it made me feel good, because it was like, okay, yeah, this is real. This is real.
Oh, and you can't, like I said, you can't even make that up.
No, I'm not that creative. Believe me, I'd have a better job if I were. So
Okay, and so now we're going to take a little short break from our sponsors. Welcome back. Okay, now we're going to talk with Kalila a little bit about her journey into mediumship and the different places it's taken her and some of the books it's inspired.
well, like I said, I thought I was doing mediumship for 20 years and then realized I'm not even scratching the surface. I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to delve deeper into mediumship and really be able to, not so much for any other reason, but my own personal satisfaction of being able to stay connected to my daughter. That was my initial goal in this, and it kind of led me on a new journey. And I think she really wanted me to take that journey. I think that's what I'm supposed to be doing, and this was the door opener for me. One of the things I started doing was getting into, of course, your mediumship development programs, so that I could learn how to hone in on that deeper connection to spirit. And one thing led to another, and before I knew it, I was in a seance room watching tables fly around the room, and this led to a whole new journey that I've been on with you for, what now, almost 2 years now.
So tell us, so you said tables flying around the room. So, you know, I want to talk a little bit about table tipping, because you've had an eye-opening experience. I think everybody that day had an eye-opening experience. So I want to talk a little bit about that experience, because I think it was one of the crossroads in your journey with the grief of the loss of Stephanie. And so I want to talk a little bit about table tipping and seances so that they understand, because of course it leads us into the latest book that's about to come out. So so table tipping, just so the audience understands, table tipping is one of the many forms of physical mediumship. Table tipping is kind of like I describe it as people who use talking boards, talking spirit boards, the little planchette that's on top that people use to communicate. The table's like a big one of those, would you say? Because as you sing and pray and ask for God's love and light, that table will just start moving around the room, and it literally is kind of like that planchette that kind of goes around on the talking board. And but also because and this was a day we're going to talk about where we had a whole bunch of mediums at the table, and we even had, I think, the master table tipper was with us.
Right, yes, he was there.
Victor Von Genex from Casadega, Florida. Let me let the audience know a little bit about Victor so they can look him up. Victor's a wonderful physical medium. If you get to experience him, please do. He was definitely at the table with us that night. And so we had a whole, just to set the scene, we had a whole group of people, mostly mediums, sitting around a table. It was Valentine's Day in 2014, and we had Victor at the lead, and I was post-Victor, and then we had a bunch of other mediums around, and yourself. And we had some people in the corners who, because we didn't have enough room at the table, who were there just to help raise that vibration and get that table moving. And that night, it did a little bit more than just move. That was a night, that was an eye-opener for many of us, even Victor himself. It was a new crossover moment for him as well. So we also had what they call a medium's cabinet. I do need to bring that because that had a lot to do with the energy that was pouring in.
Right.
In the seance room, to give a description, is basically it was a table and had a dark curtain, and in the dark curtain was a cabinet, which is a cut-in, and it's used to store the energy. And many times we'll put a medium in there to house the energy, and we get messages from there. We get all kind of phenomena that comes just from the cabinet. A lot of channeling is done there. Where different spirits will step in and channel through somebody. But this particular night, nobody was in the cabinet. We just had the 4 posts with 4 people in the corners, and we had like 8 mediums at the table. And you were one of those mediums. And so take it from there. Describe that night, that Valentine's night.
That blew my mind. That actually blew my mind because we had just started working with the table tipping in that room, and we had prepared it for when Victor came. And we hadn't had a whole lot of experience with the table moving in there. It was very, very new. We had had a few things happen, but nothing phenomenal. And on this particular day, it was kind of weird because something else had happened earlier that kind of tipped me off that there might be some surprises in store. One of the things that happened directly after Stephanie passed away was when I was on my way to make her funeral arrangements, my car started running hot. I had a van, and my van started running hot. And dealing with what I was dealing with, I literally parked it in my ex-husband's driveway, got out, grabbed his Jeep, and said, I'm using this car, and I left. Well, I didn't go back and get it for over a year. And it was just an avoidance tactic, part of the denial, the grief, because I knew that once I would have to clean that van out, I would have to look at those hospital papers, and there was just a lot of things in there I didn't want to face. So literally, I stole his Jeep and I kept it. Well, on Valentine's Day, it happened to be the day that I decided it's time, and he was pressuring me to come get the van. He's like, you gotta get this van out of my driveway, you need to do this. So on Valentine's Day, I got in the van and I brought it to my house, and I thought, you know what, I need to do this. I need to go in, I need to clean the van out, take her things out, and start doing that. And as I did, I found a little styrofoam heart in the back of the van. I have no idea how it got there. But it was just a little piece of styrofoam shaped like a heart. And I found it, and I got really excited when I found it because I knew that was not in my van before, and I don't know how it got there. So I went and I did a scan of it, and I put it on Facebook, and I said, wow, this is kind of a gift, a Valentine's gift from Stephanie. And I had no idea what else would be in store, but I kind of had a feeling that something special was going to happen, that there was going to be something special, and I was really anticipating a special message from her. So when we got the table tipping and everybody's moving and the table's kind of swaying around, and suddenly Stephanie's at the table. And I know it's Stephanie, the table's bumping me, it's literally trying to reach up and hug me, and I can feel her energy there. And somebody said, I'm not sure if it was one of the mediums at the center, said, let's see, it might have even been you, let's see if we can get her to manifest. Let's see if we can get her to manifest on the table. And we started chanting and cheering her on and saying, come on, Stephanie, you can do it. And you could see the little sparkles, almost like a little tornado, swirling around at the top of the table. And it was very exciting because we knew that was her, and she was trying so hard to physically manifest. And I think Victor was in shock. He wasn't sure. And some of you were even seeing her head. You could see, we were trying to basically get her to do a full body apparition on the table. And some of you, and I was just in awe. All I could see was the sparkles, and I see it moving around. And at some point, you said, Kalila, put your hands on the table, and you said, Stephanie, show your mother that you're really here. And across both hands simultaneously, it was like an icy breeze going across my hands. and I felt her kiss me on my cheek, and it was just...
Everybody can see.
And I
table.
just started crying. I mean, I just released everything, and it was just the most...
Comforting.
It was comforting,
And-
but it's beyond words
Yes.
to have that kind of an experience, to where, because a mother knows her child's energy. You know, you can have 10 kids and a kid walk through the doorway behind you, and you know which one it is. You know which one it is because you know, you recognize their energy, and it's like unequivocally, that was my daughter on the table. I know it was. And she kissed me on the cheek.
And of course, that was one of the many things that happened that night, but we're not going to get into the other
Oh,
things.
we can go on and on, but of course
That
that's what
might-
led to the book, Seance
Yes.
Experiments,
Right.
that should be coming out very, very soon this fall. And that was one of the first experiences that we were like, we got to start documenting what goes on in this room, because what goes on in our seance room, basically, I don't think goes on anywhere else. I'm going to say maybe in the United States. I mean, I don't know that it's not a very common thing. Let's put it that way. And, you know,
Not very
we've
common.
even been to, you know, England, Wales, and, you know, I have yet to see anything as active as some of the things that we've had happen in that room.
Yeah, we've had several things. Not just apparitions. We've had apportation. I've had apportation. We've had channeling messages from different people. We've had validations. The study just goes on and on. And we would say it's about a year's worth of different things that have happened that we've studied and have been placed into the book Seance Experiments. And it's all focused around the center, the Metaphysical Resource Center, which is in Meta,
Right.
which is our sponsor for the show. And, you know, so this is, you know, just, it's breakthrough for many. Even for, I mean, I've been all over the globe. I've been to England and I've studied at the many places that people go to study, and I've seen wonderful phenomena. You know, mediums cabinets sailing across the room, a spirit taking a bottle and pouring water in glasses, and I've seen all kinds of different phenomena. Some of it is questionable because you always have that side
I'm
of you
sure,
that you're
well, of
like,
course.
did that really happen? And but then you have that side that how else could it have happened? So
Right.
you know, it's back and forth. But I can tell you just, and like I said, in the book, it talks a lot about the different experiences and the different things. And most of the things that we've experienced were done, when you said, in the light. It was either in a red light or
Right.
in something. So when the readers read it, it's not all done in the dark like a lot of people might
Right.
think.
Right.
And so we got to really, really experience a lot of things. So let's talk a little bit about your development into mediumship. Talk a little bit about your transition, where you feel you transitioned from student to professional, or student to, you know, where you are today.
It's been a process. It's been a process, and it still surprises me. It still surprises
Well,
me.
you'll never lose that.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at what spirit comes up with, and you know, it's limitless. It really is. It's very limitless. But when I first got into this, I was still struggling so much with grief, and really, literally battling depression on a daily basis, and that was the hardest obstacle, was to keep that energy up. And you know, again, one of the, you know, catalysts was, of course, Stephanie coming through,
Yes.
our channeler, and literally crying and saying, I don't want my mom to be sad. That really made me work on that even harder. But it was through, you know, the many galleries and the practices with you, and that really helped me move along that process. But I think the biggest one was the one I did at the Wellness Expo this past March. Was that's probably the biggest gallery I had done, period, prior to the one at home.
So, wellness. Let me explain to you about the Wellness Expo. Every year, the Metaphysical Resource Center hosts a wellness expo called the Being Well Expo, and it is held locally here in New Orleans area at one of the local hotels. And you can definitely, we'll put up some information at the end of this series about that, so you can check out and maybe come to the next year's. What I want people to hear from you is that aha moment you had when you realized this is real? So we were talking about, you had done a reading at the Wellness Expo.
Well, we were doing a gallery,
yes.
And I'm up in front of these people, and it's like, okay, there's always that question, like, what if I get up here and nothing comes through?
Right.
And that's always a terrifying moment. I think it would be for any medium, is to get up there and just not connect with anything, because we don't know. We don't pick who comes through. We don't decide. Spirit does. So when it was my turn to start reading, immediately, I picked up on a gentleman that had passed away rather suddenly, and I recall it being some sort of an accident. And I just kept doing this and this, and I kept seeing this, like something, like something just blowing out of the head. And finally a lady raised her hand, and sadly her husband had been shot in the head. And it had been pretty recent. She was still struggling with her own grief. So, that, of course, rattled my emotions, because I see this woman and I see her emotions welling up, and it's like, okay, now I've got to give her a message. Now we've established this, I've got to give her a message. And I walked over to her, and I even touched her on the shoulder, and I start getting a vision of roses. I keep seeing a single rose just falling and falling and falling, a red rose. It's like, oh my gosh, this is the silliest, most ridiculous vision. It's like, why am I seeing this? I got to give this lady a message. And I just spit it out, and I said, okay, I don't know why I'm seeing this, but I just keep seeing roses, throwing roses. And she burst into tears, and she said, when my husband was buried, I threw in 100 red roses into his grave before they closed it off. And she opened her arm like this, and she had a red rose tattooed on her arm.
Wow.
And a chill just went up my spine, and it was just like, wow. Like, how do you even explain that? Sometimes it's even hard to explain it to yourself.
You can't Google that.
You can't Google that. And the thing is, you can't Google it. And the thing is that you not only amaze other people, you amaze yourself. And it's not me amazing myself. Spirit amazes me every time I connect with them.
Spirit amazes everyone who's connected to it, because you just don't know. They give you these messages out of nowhere. I tell people stories all the time about how out of nowhere this stuff just regurgitates out. We call it psychic vomit.
Yes, and
it
sometimes
just comes out. You're like,
yeah, sometimes things just get said.
Like,
wow.
Yeah, and you're just like, whoa.
Yeah, and it is amazing, and I think that's the thing that people lose sight of, is that they always want to credit the medium. They always want to go, oh, you did it. And it's like, when I'm not doing it. It's spirit doing it.
Right, exactly.
And I think that's something we all need to really kind of keep an eye on, is that we all remember that it's spirit that is so amazing.
I think a lot of mediums like that, like to say, it's them, but like I tell people all the time, everybody's born with the same gifts. Everybody has the 6 senses. We all do. Mothers have them with their children. So in some way, shape, or form, I truly believe that everyone has a certain degree of intuition.
Oh, absolutely.
And what mediums do, or in psychics both, they go into that realm and they practice it. So it's almost like practicing the piano. You can bang on the keys, you can play chopstick, or you can play like Mozart. It just depends on how much you work at it, or how much you work on the connection that you have, and you let that inner spirit enter. And it explains a lot of phenomena. It explains a lot of things, and of course that's a whole nother show.
Whole nother show. We got lots of whole other shows.
Whole other shows. So, talk a little bit about, because we're going to start winding down. Just talk a little bit about where you see yourself going from here. What are some of the new projects that you're looking at getting involved in? And I want to kind of put not an end, because there's never an end, there's always just a new beginning. I want to kind of put a wrap up on how Stephanie, where you are today with Stephanie and your grief.
Grief is not something you ever get over. I mean, I'm always going to be missing my child. I will always miss having her physically in my life, but I've grown to become accustomed to her being where she is. I just have a different dynamics in the relationship that I have with her now. And sometimes it's funny, because she does come through the channeler on not often, but every now and then she will come through, and it's almost like the roles are reversed now, because she's teaching me. For 30 years I showed her this world, And I was basically the person who helped her maneuver in this world, which was very difficult for her. And now she's showing me her world. And sometimes she even comes down and scolds me. And she'll say, now Mom, she appeared in a dream one time, and I was still going through a rough period. It was around one of the anniversaries. I don't know if it was her birthday or whatever, but I had kind of gone into a little dip of depression and was struggling with that. And she literally showed up in a dream. And in the dream, another spirit came, woke me up, brought me to her room, and they opened the door. She was standing there with her arms folded, and she says, Mom, I can't have you doing this. I just can't have you doing this. You gotta pull it together. I can't keep coming down here and fixing this for you. You've got to progress. But I find myself now wanting to do more and kind of feeling like something's missing. I love doing galleries. I love doing readings for people because I like helping people with their own grief, because I think that that's basically my mission, is to take my experience and use it to help other people. But I also see things going further. I'd spent many years in the healing arts. I'd actually gone to school for that many years ago, and worked a lot with energy work, and I really feel myself being pulled in the direction to use some of this connection with spirit, getting back into the healing. And one of the plans that I have for next year, hopefully that it pans out, is to go to Brazil and start studying some of the spiritual practices in the Umbanda religion, which would include the herbalism, the healing, and also the mediumship, but on a totally different level than what I've been doing for the past year and a half. So I feel like Spirit's really pulling me back into using some of this connection with Spirit to really deepen working with the healing end of things.
Well, great. Get a clue. When that all happens, we're going to have you back. In fact, there's so many other more interesting topics too, just as interesting as the next. We need to get you back here to discuss with our viewers, because you've done so much. I mean, with the paranormal investigations, with the many Caribbean cultures that you're wonderful historian with those things, and just things that the public would really like to know. So we're going to get that out. We're going to probably have you back the next time you'll come back. We're going to probably talk about the Caribbean cultures and about the voodoo, hoodoo, the voodoo, all around New Orleans. We're going to get it out there. You know what all that really means for people, and so they're not so afraid to come here and look at it, because it's really not something to be afraid of, actually.
No, it's not. And what's funny is people think it's so mysterious and so woo-woo, and it's funny because it's so hand in hand in what we're doing with the mediumship stuff. Because in these cultures, your medicine men were also your mediums and your psychics and your soothsayers and also your doctors. So it's all hand in hand. There is no separation between this communication with spirit and the healing work and the spiritual work. It's all together. There is no separation of it.
We'll definitely have you back to discuss that with our audience. Well, thank you, Kalila, for joining us today. Next time, we'll be joining Dr. Charlotte Pipes. Dr. Charlotte Pipes is one of the city's, I call her the resident witch, though she doesn't necessarily like that, but she's one of our pagan leaders here in the New Orleans area, and she's got lots of wonderful stories and lots of wonderful things to share with us. So tune in then. Until then, this is Sid Patrick. Namaste. Have a good night.